Mr. Speaker, Mitsushi said that completely new concepts human cannot judge. Yes, the debate operates in the following situation. When nobody can call a correct decision, a normative decision, who should be calling the verdict? Note that this immoral experiment happens at the expense of somebody innocent. Therefore, like the example of Koppelnik's or Darwin is completely irrelevant because that had no realistic downside. So we don't really think that example stands. But anyway, the problem with their model is that number one, there's no proof that the content of the invention is intended to benefit the society to begin with. This may only feed in or only benefit the fame and the political standing of individual researchers within the academic field. And secondly, there's no accountability on whether this is the only way. It might be the easiest way for these researchers to generate tangible results without any third-party check. This is the flaw in their model. But with that being pointed out, I'm going to explore the following two flashpoints in order to prove the superiority of our side of the house. First, I'm going to discuss the content of and the process of the study and tell you why it is rather the tangible harm is going to be realized. And secondly, I'm going to discuss the point on who should decide the go and no-go of these studies, whether the public or individual scientists. Now moving on. Mr. Speaker, first I have to point out that all of their examples, like cancer, HIV, better vaccination, clean water, none of their examples were difficult enough that the public cannot really understand the benefit and the cost of this development. The argumentation coming from their side of the house is that because the public does not really understand the benefits and the consequence of these studies, this will be delayed or being stopped when there is like discussion prior to the actual execution. We don't really think that they've given you a realistic content or example that exemplifies that argument, because all of what they said is quite like straightforward. And if like human life is necessary, probably there could be a discussion happening on like in a realistic sense. Compared to this, Mr. Speaker, we have told you that there's no proof that a study, this brand new study, will benefit mankind and society as a whole in the first place. Like we have already told you that like examples like the killer AIs are like based on like selfish intent of like the military or researchers, because as Enomoto-kun has already told you, there's a selfish pursuit of career within the academia because the competition is so harsh, like the case of Obokata-san or Dr. Huang from South Korea. Their response coming from Uchiyama-san and the government whip was that, well, we can first try it out and then try to regulate, because the regulation and application is the problem. So we can do it after realization. We don't really believe this, because the problem with this statement is the following two. Number one, because the technological advancement is too fast, actually public cannot catch up with the advancement with like proper discussion. We see this in two like distinctive examples. For example, the killer AI example, which is being developed by the American and Russian military, because the research advances like far faster than the discussion, it is being already inputted, like it has been already installed in the military, and the discussion doesn't even happen to begin with. This example like clearly exemplifies that it is unstoppable when already application starts, not yet. And there is a clear and tangible harm and also like a moral challenge by like having execution start first. Also, the second like similar example happened in the agriculture chemical produced by Monsanto, because like they produced this chemical through like genetic modification, and they have started the application. And although they have tried to control the situation, because there were like bugs and birds like carrying these chemical all over the place, the risk like kind of expanded to begin with. That's why like uncontrolled and unprecedented execution of like these studies is extremely dangerous for those two reasons. We don't really think that like reactive discussion and regulation is possible for these extremely new technologies. Rather, we think that preventing this on a preemptive basis actually benefits. Yes?
So you said that public discourse can happen before discovery, but cannot afterwards in terms of regulation. Is that not a contradiction?
Okay, so like even if it does not happen, if people don't like understand the concept to begin with, they can prevent the potential harm, and which happens on the large scale, which we think it is more beneficial than their point. Moving on to the second clash, who should decide? So problem statement coming from their side of the house was that scientist community is actually hijacking this important ethical question. Two responses. Number one, we have already provided you an opposition model where we have a committee with a lot of people in. They haven't really responded to this. They said that SQ has a problem. We don't think that was a genuine response. But secondly, second response is that response coming from Uchiyama-kun was that, even if we tried to expand the committee, white rich men would dominate it anyway. Two responses. Number one, if that's the case, it's quite similar to the existing legal framework or the political sphere, which is probably dominated by the rich and powerful. But secondly, probably famous researchers or competent researchers are also highly educated people. So we don't really think that there is an exclusive advantage or a disadvantage on our side of the house. And rather, the realistic conclusion that we can reach is we at least should try to expand this committee as much as possible. And even this does not stand, you cannot still vote for their side of the house, because there's no reason to limit this decision-making to a hijacked committee, to a even more hijacked individual who is dominated by his personal interest. That's why we don't really think that they have proved their burden of proof. Lastly, he said that, again, who decides what? So they said that public cannot decide this new concept. Number one is that, again, I'm going to re-deliver my thing, that they have underestimated the public's ability to understand the examples that they have delivered. But secondly, if the harm and benefits are unknown to the public, and there is a risk of not being able to control the benefits and harm, rather probably it is good for the public to be comfortable with their current status, because at least they know what happens and what's possible and what's not possible, and they're happy with the known sphere of the world. We don't really think that there is an explicit necessity to enforce something unknown on the public, because at the end, the entire society has to benefit from this university studies, for example, because they operate within and based on the public infrastructure being provided by the government. And therefore, rather the public should be the one deciding what's good and what's not, and not the individual institutions or researchers. For all those reasons, the motion falls. Thank you.